Hello, in this video we're going to have a look at the second differences of quadratic sequences. So I've got a couple of quadratic sequences here. It's very difficult to tell just by looking at them that they are quadratics, but it does become quite a bit easier when we have a look at this technique of second differences. So first of all, what do I mean by my first difference? Well, that's the difference between each of these terms within my sequence. So the difference between 2 and 6 is 4. Between 6 and 12 is 6. 12 and 20 is 8. 20 and 30 is 10. 30 and 42 is 12. So I'm going to call those my first difference. What my second difference becomes the difference in my differences. So the difference between 4 and 6 is 2, 6 and 8 is 2, 8 and 10 is 2, 10 and 12 is also 2. So if I've got a quadratic sequence, these second differences are always going to have the same value. So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. If it was a linear sequence, these first differences would all hold the same value. My second differences would then be 0. So quadratic sequence, my first differences all hold different values, but when I look at the difference between each of those differences, it has the same value, in this case 2. Let's have a look at the example just below. So 3 and 13, difference between those two is 10. Difference between 13 and 31 is 18. Difference between 31 and 57 is 26. 57 and 91, well 3 will get me up to 60, and then I want to add another 31, so that's going to give me 34, and 91 up to 33, so 9 up to 100, and then another 33 is going to give me 42. So those are my first differences. My second differences, I will look at the differences between those. So the difference between 10 and 18 is 8. 18 and 26 is 8. 26 and 34 is also 8. And 34 and 42 is 8 as well. So those second differences all got the same value. They're all equal to 8. At that stage I know I must have a quadratic sequence. When you're writing these out, it's really worth making sure when you're writing the differences that you write them between two of the values in your sequence. So if you're working out the difference between 3 and 13, write the value halfway between. When you're doing your second differences, you're then writing your 8 between your values of 10 and 18. It should then line up with one of the numbers in your sequence. So my 8 and 13, 8 and 57, 8 and 91. It really helps to try and avoid some of the mistakes that you can make when you're working out these second differences. Okay, time for you to have some practice. So read through the instructions in the email, and there's an exercise to have a go at. Once you finish that, come back and watch the second part of the video. Okay, you should have completed the exercise, and now we're moving on to something a little bit different, but still linked in with our second differences. This time I've been given a table, and I've got some values of first differences and one of the terms within my sequence, and I've got a whole bunch of gaps, and I need to try and work out what those gaps are going to be. Sometimes it's difficult to know where to start with some of these questions, and it's tricky to work out where to go. I think with this one it's easiest to work out what these second differences are, just like we did in the first part of the lesson. So the difference between 3 and 6 is 3. The difference between 6 and 9 is also 3. And because I know I'm going to be dealing with a quadratic sequence, these two numbers are the same, I know that these two differences must also be 3. I can then work out what these numbers for my first differences are. So the difference between 6 and 9 was 3, so 9 was 3 higher than 6. This number here has got to be 3 higher than 9, so it needs to be 12. Similarly, this number here is going to be 3 higher than 12, So this one's going to be 15, and this one, I could write another 3 in here, is going to be 3 higher than my 15 to give me a value of 18. Similarly with the numbers on the right, this number here has got to be 12 bigger than 20, because the difference between 20 and this number is 12. So if I add 12 onto my 20, I'm going to get 32. So the difference between 20 and 32 gives me my 12. 20 plus 12, 32. Similarly, this number here has got to be 15 bigger than 32. So 32 plus 15 is 47. I can also work backwards to these earlier values in my sequence, because I know that 20 is 9 higher than this value here. So if I take 9 away from 20, it's going to give me this value. So 20 take away 9 is 11. Just make sure that's correct. So 11, the difference between 11 and 20 is 9. It's looking good. 11 here, sorry. It must be 6 higher than this number here. So this number plus 6 gives me 11. So 11 take away 6 is 5. So the difference between 5 and 11 is my 6. Similarly, this number here is 3 smaller than 5. The number that's 3 smaller than 5, 5 take away 3 is 2. So again, the gap between 2 and 5 gives me my value 3. So if we know some of these first differences, and maybe one of the sequence values here, we can use that information to generate the other values within the table. So just remember that the second difference, that's looking at the gap between these two. So this number must be that values, in this case 3, bigger than 3, to give me the value of 6. Okay, your turn for some practice. Again, follow the instructions in the email. You have had an exercise set for you. Give it a go.